as I've been trying to emphasize, is taking something from start to finish, which is the metaphor of Genesis and Revelation, then waking up the universe to getting that energy of start to finish is not a bad thing. So it can be incorporated in a lot of other stuff. And realistically, that's kind of the thing. Dee and Kelly, they had a lot of problems with this. And the angels knew they had problems with it. And I think that if you really look at true and faithful relation, a lot of the time Dee's kind of struggling with what Kelly's saying. Kelly hates it more. Kelly doesn't want to be there. He's very clear that he doesn't want to be there. But Dee's kind of like trying to reinterpret what they're saying. Like when they're like, oh, you know, sweep your houses clean, you're impure, blah, blah, blah. I think what, and this is an opinion, I could be wrong about this, but I think what Crowley's intimating when he associates so strongly with Kelly, and in his criticism of Dee, because he has a criticism of Dee, I think what he's saying is essentially, like, Dee completely misunderstood sin, and what sin was. And he was actually the sinner, he was the impure one, and Kelly was perhaps, in at least that mind, sort of just the one having the problem because Dee was constantly interpreting everything. It's worth noting that Dee was a lot older than Kelly as well. And like, you know, he had the authority. Kelly was on the fringes. He was relying on Dee for pretty much to support himself and his family. So, you know, he was not in a good position in terms of like arguing with that. And Kelly gets really sarcastic at different points. Like, one of the things that the angels say constantly when they start to arrive is like, you know, this place is holy, this place is holy, this place is holy. That's how they start to like deliver the communications. And then there's one great line where when the angel's finally gone, Kelly's like, yes, now finally this place is holy because they're out of here. And he's really not happy that they're there. What this means, I think, is just that these guys were kind of running scared. There's a line in one of the ethers in The Vision and the Voice where they make explicit reference to Dee and Kelly and their work, and the angel says in this vision that, you know, this was a fruit untimely ripped from a tree. It was like a herald of the new aeon, but it was a couple hundred years before its time, so like they didn't know how to handle it. This is significant for two reasons. One, because Enochian magic precipitates Thelema and so on and so forth. But also because when Crowley worked the Enochian system to do the Aethers, this was preceded with a lot of homosexual intercourse, and this was kind of one of the main ways of developing this. When Kelly does his work on his own, and he's working without Dee, Dee writes down some of the things he said, and I mentioned a couple of them, blah, 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 but Dee also makes a note that there's other things which I would never write down, like too blasphemous, something like that, like too bad to write down. I can't remember the exact sort of phrasing, but whatever. And you'd think, after he's just said that Jesus Christ is not to be worshipped as Lord in Elizabethan England, what's too bad to write down after that? You know, like he's already in enough trouble with the church as it is. And then it's later on when the angels are kind of like, well, this is how you advance your magic, that they come up with the idea that they should swap wives and have sex with each other's wives, which is interesting for two reasons. One, because Kelly didn't want to get married, and the angels actually commanded him to marry this chick to begin with, which is weird, but he went along with it. And the second thing is, in the Christian church, as Dee and Kelly understood it, when you become married, you become one flesh with the other person. The man and wife are the same. So I am suspicious that what Dee didn't want to write down was that the angels were encouraging him and Kelly to have sexual intercourse with each other, and because they wouldn't do that, or they couldn't accept that, it was important for Kelly to get married, and then for them to swap wives so that it would be the same under the church as being of one flesh and having sex in that context. And this is very strongly why I suspect that the angels were telling Crowley that it was coming too soon and people weren't ready for it and blah, 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 because, you know, it's sort of an open secret that the whole no-aeon thalamic current has a very strong sexual component. And, like, you don't have to necessarily get into the details, but I mean, that's a part of it. This is completely logical because the concept of there is no God but man and being like God, what we know of God as we could, the only rational way to define God is the creator of the universe, and human beings are only, like, they create in the most physical, basic sense when they're having sex, essentially. It's when we reproduce after our own kind. So that is the act of becoming like God, essentially. And this is, I think, intrinsically connected to the system of Enochian magic, and I don't really think, I think that, I'm not saying that you can't work it alone, you don't necessarily have to have a partner to work it, but like, to include that aspect of it in some respects is definitely necessary. Alright, that was fast. Have we covered it? Do we have a question before I get into the parables? Because the parables are weird. No, we're good. Am I talking too fast? No. Alright, cool. So, the angels are aware, when Dee and Kelly are doing that thing, that they're kind of hostile to it. And they actually predict the fact that Dee and Kelly aren't going to go all the way. There's one of the parables that happens late in True and Faithful, which they call the parable of the adder. So it's kind of like the angels describing how there's the mother snake who has the baby snakes, and it's comparing Dee and Kelly to the baby snakes. And it says the mother snake will poke her tail up and pretend that it's like a hostile snake, but it's not really. They need to just trust the mother snake and go along with it. And this is pretty much precipitates Dee and Kelly sort of breaking off or whatever. And like, the angels can tell that they're not like really into it, and they try to give them a few different stories like this. I won't get into all of them, but they're very similar in the respect of, like, we're going to now tell you a creepy story that's just like, hey, you gotta trust us more, or whatever. Which they can't really seem to get on board with. Which is weird when you consider how much weird shit happens with them. There's one point in the diaries where Dee's like talking about how this green fire has come out of the crystal and surrounded Kelly's head, and it surrounds his head for a while, and he talks for a long time, he doesn't remember anything he said. And it's like, well, you know, if I was reading that in a modern ceremonial magical book, I would be very suspicious. The thing is, this was Dee's diary to himself. He wasn't intending this for publication. His reasons to make shit up are non-existent, essentially. So, and what does he mean by green fire? Well, that's completely debatable as well. Maybe it was in his mind's eye or whatever, but he's not saying it's in his mind's eye. He's saying it's green fire shooting out of the crystal. That's what he's saying. There's also periods where Kelly talks in languages that he doesn't understand. When he talks in Greek to Dee, and then he gets pissed off because he's like, I'm not going to be talking gibberish. But Dee actually knew Greek, so he knew what he was saying. And it was actually the angel speaking through Kelly saying to Dee, don't trust Kelly. So, like, the fact that shit like this was going on, and the fact that there's no motivation on either of their parts to lie, makes this one of the more significant, like, sort of magical works out there, which is why that I think people should be trying to come up with a way to work the system. If you don't want to be part of any ceremonial magical group, that's fine. The Golden Dawn Outer College was structured around getting people ready to work with Enochian magic. So I think that and Hurley's AA system, although not exactly with the same intent, is structured similarly. So if people want to seriously look at that, I think that regardless of whether you want to like become part of one of those groups or self-initiate or whatever you want to do, look at the way the grades are structured and look at the things that are being taught at different stages of this, because there is a trajectory, and this is where that trajectory is going. Which is also, again, I cannot possibly emphasize enough, the fundamental essence of the system is to be on a start-to-finish trajectory. Yeah, and like all of the sort of lessons of the Outer College will eventually tie into working in some respect with the Enochian system, because these are all questions that kind of need to be answered before the